Hi, and thanks for coming back to the Shifting Schools podcast. I am Trisha Friedman, and on with me today is Fiona Goodall, who is a special educator with over 20 years of experience. Fiona holds a Bachelor of Education and Master of Special Education. She's a certified facilitator of the Peers program, Peaceful Kids Mindfulness and Positive Psychology programs, and is a certified facilitator of Lego-based therapy. We are here today to talk a little bit about what it means to sustain a dialogue around AI and to maybe take on a cautiously optimistic mindset. Fiona has worked across all education sectors, including specialist autism settings, special education settings, and mainstream schools, both in Australia and abroad. It's a real pleasure to tap into her expertise on the podcast this week. Before we dive in with our conversation, we do have a quick word from our show sponsor.
Discover the power of acknowledgement with Libra. In a world where every staff member's dedication shapes the future, recognizing their efforts becomes our mission. Libra transforms your school into a place where achievements, big and small, are celebrated daily, creating a ripple effect of motivation and pride. Join the recognition revolution with Libra, where every achievement is a cause for celebration. For more information and a free demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com today.
And now, with that, on with the show. Fiona, such a pleasure to be speaking with you. You have an extensive, long history of learning about the potential for assistive technologies. And I'm really curious how that background and all of that foundational knowledge has positioned you to have really intriguing insight as we are exploring what opportunities might be on the horizon or might already be here with AI.
Yeah, so I have been working in all the different education sectors here in Australia, private, independent schools, Catholic education, specialist settings. The last 15 years or so, I've been working in mainstream schools, that's what we call them, and we usually have inclusive departments within those schools. So I was heading up those in the last couple of schools, and a large percentage of the students who we were working with had learning differences. That's why they were coming to us. Lots with reading difficulties and difficulties in mathematics as well. In particular, I was really interested in literacy intervention. So we were putting some great evidence-based literacy intervention programs in place, but we were finding that the little people just still couldn't catch up. Yes, we could gradually teach them to read it at their pace, but we needed compensatory strategies as well. Otherwise, they were just missing the curriculum completely. And these young people cognitively were able to understand the curriculum and the discussions and the content, but in terms of their literacy, weren't able to respond in writing or keep up with the reading. And that kind of impacts so many other areas as well. They weren't accessing rich literature that their same age peers were, so they weren't developing the vocabulary, they weren't hearing all of those different principles of reading. So just really quickly discovered that, yes, you can teach young people to read with really systematic, synthetic, phonics-based interventions, but we still need other ways for them to access the curriculum. So that's where I really became interested in assistive technologies. Particularly, we had some for mathematics, but I guess I'll talk about literacy. So that was really interesting. So I was in a prep. So that's our school starts from grade 1, goes to grade 12, and our prep is a preparatory grade. So I was in a P to 12 school, and we were actually starting some assistive technologies with some little people right in prep. We could see from prep that this literacy intervention was going to be arduous and it was going to be the long haul. So we started to introduce iPad. We had a program we were using called Clicker Sentences, where the young person could have the sentences read to them and they could drag different words into the sentences and they were able to respond and write stories. We were using speech to text and text to speech right from the beginning, not with all. There were some young people we could certainly catch up, but we found that it wasn't a really quick fix and it was really hard work for the young person, for the teachers, for the support staff. It wasn't just a quick overnight fix. So we were finding that the earlier we introduced it, the better the young people were by the time they got to mid-primary. So they were still on that literacy intervention, but we noticed that they were able to access the curriculum much better as they entered into primary school. So that's where I really started. So we had lots of different programs that we were using. I won't name them because they're obviously still in use, but we had speech to text to speech. We had a great program I was using in the upper primary and in a secondary school that was uploaded onto computers, and the young people were able to summarise information. They were able to get key points. Obviously had spell check, it had text to speech, all of those sorts of things. We were using a variety. We had applications that could scan text and read back to the young person. We were teaching dictation as well. That was interesting. And again, that really relied on the technology as well. And it looked like a quick fix, but it wasn't always. Sometimes it was more frustrating than actually helpful. So I've used a lot of different types of assistive technology. We've had assistive technology consultants come into our school and consult with us and teach us. Yeah, I've spent probably at least the last 15 years trying out a lot of different types of technologies in schools to help young people. That's probably why I'm quite excited about the opportunities that AI present now.
Well, and I'm guessing too, in hearing you reflect and recount on that, I think there's also a real awareness that nothing is going to be a silver bullet, and that this process of experimentation is, and I think understanding that it's not necessarily just the tool, it really is about the craft and the implementation. You can have a gigantic budget and be in this situation where any tool you want, you can purchase it. But if you haven't done that thoughtful training and thinking about matching with pedagogy, the tool's not really going to do what it can. The analogy I often give is my father has gifted my wife and I a lot of his tools. He's stopped his woodworking and is slowing down with fixing things around the house. And so he's gifted me this huge bundle of tools. That does not necessarily mean I am going to be a carpenter overnight just because I have them. So when you say that you're excited or you feel like you can see the potential for AI, is there something that you're thinking, yes, and here's what I think we need to be mindful of when we are experimenting with this technology? Or again, I find there are still so many folks that are maybe hesitant to do that experimentation. So do you have a thought in terms of what it means just to get started to try out the tool, or why the trying out is going to be a part of the learning?
That's such a great question. I love that analogy about the tools too. I'm going to steal that from you. That's a great one. One of the massive challenges we had was the uptake, particularly as the young people got into secondary education, our upper primary school and then into high school. It was embarrassing. Nobody wanted to be seen to be using anything different than anybody else were using in the classroom in terms of, so I had some incredible teachers who were just working and assistants who were working so hard to get this up and running. We had extensive training. So we were training in the tools. Like I said, we had consultants out. I had whole staff training. I had our assistant staff training. I trained the young people. We actually had focused training sessions. We all worked with them one-on-one. And then they'd go in the classroom and they didn't want to use it because nobody else was using it beside them. It was really interesting. And relating that to AI, and I'm just talking about the young people. So I work with children, teens and young adults who identify as neurodivergent. Most of them all have a diagnosis of autism. And it's really interesting that you talk about, I guess, the mindset around that is I've noticed that the young adults who I've been talking with about assistive technology, they're really hesitant. And I think some of them are at university, some of them in the senior phase of their education, and they're really, I guess they're rules-based as well. And so they're really hesitant about you, and some of them don't want to know about it. And I've actually got a couple of young people who are studying IT at university, but don't really want to know about how we can use the AI for functional or social reasons. And yeah, they're quite worried about breaking the rules and getting caught around plagiarism. They're worried about getting caught down the deep, dark hole of doom scrolling or getting addicted to tech. So they're quite conscious of that. So it's a slow burner. I've almost found, like my generation, I'm Generation X, I've found that some people I know have come to it really enthusiastically, whereas our younger people are a little bit, and I'm not sure whether that's because all we hear is the worst case scenario, and there are some horrific worst case scenarios, we know, with lots of AI and deep fakes and things, but we're not hearing the good stuff as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because a big part of my advice has often been like, do not separate the literacies with this. Media literacy is going to be so important with AI literacy. And I actually have a big component of a certain workshop I give just looks at the marketing of different tools and also some of the sensationalism in the reporting about AI. As you mentioned, we always hear about the worst case scenarios. And I would say this is true of all technology, snowblowers included. We've all heard the horror stories, but it doesn't necessarily make the news when everyone on my street has a snowblower. It worked well. Their driveways are safer. And why that's not headline news. So it's so important to be talking about those things. And coming back to what you said about the experimentation, this is where over the summer, I've actually been working with some pre-service teachers. And I actually had a little part where we just look at how the media has informed the way that we think about bots, both chatbots and robots, and looking at everything from movie trailers to song lyrics, because there is this big conversation in popular culture about these things too, and thinking about, but how does that inform the way that we think about this? But I've also just been dropping these little moments and opportunities for the students to see how it might be an asset. So it's not a must-have, but it's a scaffold. And we were doing the question formation strategy. And it was, you had the opportunity, like either you could be generating questions on your own, or in the slide, I had a little, or click the bot for help, where I leave the prompt that I have and I ask the chatbot to take on the role of my student's age, and I give it the context and I say, just give me 3 starter responses to this. So it's you're stuck, you need some help. It's there if you want it. It's not there if you don't want it. And at the end of the activity, I always have students reflect on, if you use the help, was it an asset or a distraction? And now, actually, if you click on the help, would it have been useful or not? Because I think when we're in this place currently of, I'm not sure how this would help, we have to provide those experiences. Just like with the toolbox analogy, the physical, like hammers and drills, I'm never actually going to know what they can do until I have a situation where I'm going to use that hammer. Fiona, I'll be sure to link to this in the show notes. You've written about the potential social uses for AI with neurodivergent learners. And again, like this is that situation where I feel like people need to hear some stories, hear some examples to get it. Can you walk us through a use case that maybe is not necessarily about the academics, but is about friendship dynamics or social emotional learning?
Exactly it's interesting what you were just saying as well. A couple of things. I am using it in the terms of not just shoving it down your face and this is how you should all be using it. It's more about, is there a blocker? Can at least just get you started. It's not about giving you all the answers. It's not about robbing you of ideas and creativity. It's just sometimes maybe to give you a little shove to get you started. That's how similar to what you were saying as well. I love something I'm not doing that I thought was really great that you just said, is getting them to reflect on it afterwards. That's such a great idea. And something else I'm digressing a little bit, but something else you talked about as well is, again, when I was using the assistive technology in schools, and I can't remember the data now, but a high percentage in terms of digital literacies. We were finding that young people were starting secondary school, and all of a sudden we've got laptops and all sorts of things. They could all scroll, they can all use Snapchat beautifully, but they didn't know how to open a Word document or a folder or save something. And we were spending 6 months of the year teaching just basic digital literacies. It's similar to this as well. It's just dropping the seed and drip feeding, I think, in really functional kind of ways. You were asking about, and exactly something else you were saying as well, is you're just finding teachable moments, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I don't have an actual class where I'm saying, okay, we're all coming over to learn about AI. I'm just dropping it into teachable moments, and some of my staff are as well. I've got an occupational therapist as part of our team, and we've been talking about how we can just gradually introduce it, not shove it down their throats. I guess a good example would be just last Friday. So I had a young adult group, and we were doing some creative thinking games, and I was using ChatGPT to start some silly story starters, and we were sitting around just talking, and one fellow mentioned how they're about to go to Japan. It's the first time he's travelling overseas. It's the first time he's been in a plane, and he was really quite worried about it. And so I had, I had it up on the screen. Let's have a go and just put this in, and such is worried about going to Japan, anxious about the flight. We put a few specifics about him personally, that he likes to do, things that he's particularly worried about. Do you have some strategies? And he just came up with all of these amazing strategies. And then the more you use it, the more you understand how to fine tune it, and the more intuitive you become and it becomes. And then we started to say, are there any apps that would be helpful? And it said Tripit app would be helpful to plan, and Calm app would be helpful if you're feeling stressed. And a few of them were like, I don't know about that. And he was quite interested. And his mum then emailed me later to say he was chatting about some of the things that came up. So it was just about drip feeding as well. In that conversation, another young person can get really socially exhausted quite quickly, and we're helping our young people to make informed friends and to consolidate friendships via getting together with one another. And they've made a friend with this young person who wants to catch up in a group context. So they want to catch up with this young person, but they don't want the group context is just a bit overwhelming at the moment. So this person had texted them, and so we said, let's put that in as well. I can't remember what we said, but give me a text where I've been invited to a group catch up. I really want to catch up with the person, but I don't want to catch up in a group context. And it came up with this amazing text. Hi, it's really great to hear from you. I'd really love to catch up. Sorry, I can't make it to Saturday, but how about next week? Blah, blah, blah. And then I showed them how you can, some of them were a bit skeptical, so we tweaked it a little bit, just little things like that, just dropping it into the moment when you can. So that was just a recent example.
The scenario piece, I think, is huge. And that is the one that I find gets most people really excited. That exact scenario that you just mentioned, where I know this is coming up. Like, I would love to have some preparation or something that can help me script or even imagine what that's going to be like. I've created a few little mega prompts that will generate a scenario with a dialogue and with some reflective questions that can then be brought to groups. And it was really interesting because the first time I modeled this, a bunch of teachers said, actually, it might be really interesting for us to do this with some of our conflict stuff. Because, and this is where I think when we're talking about neurodiversity, everyone thinks differently. And I find this is when we're talking about accommodations, it benefits everyone. I have yet to come across someone who really loves conflict, who would say, I am 100% comfortable in conflict, right? I have not come across that person. And so I think for going through a scenario with some options and doing some of that perspective switching, it can be really interesting. And I love that you said some of your students also had some skepticism or were like, no, that's not quite right. Because you have the power to engage with feedback and revise and tweak. And I always like to remind folks, do you know what that is? That's teaching writing. I feel like the art of revision, we have this completely different modality in which to do that. And I find when they are these really personalized scenarios, it's not as much of a challenge to get students talking about it, to get them interested in doing the analysis, because it's also about us. So there's a lot to tap into with that. And I would also say, I think doing what you did and having your students critique the advice is very important, because Fiona, I'm seeing at like this very fast rate, everything is going to have a built-in bot if it doesn't already. And I think to the extent that all of us are going to have to get better about critiquing the information that we're given to us from a bot, I know of so many students who have said, yeah, I'm trying to work out either friendship issues or I'm asking questions that I would have asked I'm bringing this to a chat bot now. And I think this is, again, that information literacy of you have to understand not to take that advice without really thinking critically about what it's saying and maybe why it's saying too.
Thank you for tuning in to Shifting Schools. Let's pause our discussion to spotlight Libra HQ, a breakthrough in using AI to deepen connections within organizations. Imagine an environment where every staff member feels truly seen and valued. This is the heart of Libra's mission. Libra transforms how leaders celebrate and recognize the personal and professional milestones of their team members. It's not just about reminders. Libra's AI dives deeper, offering insight into enhanced team cohesion and promote a culture where support and acknowledgement are paramount. Picture a school where every individual is acknowledged, from work achievements to personal victories, creating a culture of appreciation in just minutes a day. In these challenging times, where the demands on educators have never been higher, Libra offers a way for school leaders to lead with true empathy and compassion, ensuring every team member feels an integral part of their community's success. Discover how Libra can revolutionize your school's culture. For a demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com. Let's build a future where every educator and staff member feels connected and valued. And now, let's get back to our conversation.
You've described yourself as cautiously optimistic when it comes to AI. Let's talk more about the cautious optimism, what that mindset might look or sound like in practice.
I guess I'm the same. I'm the same as everybody else. I get worried about particularly the arts and the ability to be able to generate creative responses and even images, and the same as everybody, concerned about what AI is going to do to our workforce as well. And because I work with some young people who have learning differences or intellectual disability, and I can see that there are jobs that are being replaced by AI that typically might be really suited to those young people as well. There are some. AI can often be sold by let's take repetitive tasks away and replace them with robots or whatever. But there's some people who love that as well. So I guess that's where I can get cautious about it as well. And I know there's lots of really insidious things that are happening, but I guess I just reflect that's happened in humanity since time began. I'm not really sure how different we are now. So I think we probably just really do need to focus on that functionality. And like you and I are both saying, just drop it into little functional moments, teachable moments, because we're really, in terms of the young people, the only sort of exposure they're getting a lot of the time to the potential of AI is around academia, how it can structure your assignment and how it can paraphrase and how it can do dot points or start your abstract or whatever it is, all of those sorts of things. But there's so many great other applications. Another couple of examples that we've just used recently, another young person was writing an email that was a little bit difficult, and we just asked it to write it in a friendly yet firm tone, and it just tweaked a few different words and it changed the tone of the email that landed a lot better. Like I was explaining, our OT, our occupational therapist at the moment, she's using it. She's doing a cooking class with a small group of young people, and one young lady has dyslexia, another young lady has significant fatigue issues, another young lady has some mobility challenges, and another one has quite significant eating preferences. So trying to find a menu that they're going to cook as a small group has been really interesting. We've gone to AI, and with them, we've had it up on the screen. And when you're doing it collaboratively, you get more buy-in, particularly with teens. You're going to get buy-in. And so we've just become really specific about we would like a recipe for people within this budget that doesn't have quinoa and blah, blah, and whatever, that's not too spicy, that's gluten-free, and it'll come up with something. Say, no, I don't like coriander, and it'll come up with something else. And it's just learning how to tweak it. Now give that to me in clear steps that I can tick off. Now give that to me in clear. You can just tweak it. You just get so much better at it when you're using it for functional reasons. And I guess it's just being with the young person to support them to do that, and just finding those moments is going to be really important for us, I think, to help them understand that it can be a help, not a big scary thing as well. It's been with us for a long time anyway, so it's just probably in our face now.
Yeah, and I take your point too about this is part of the technology cycle, right? There's a new technology, and I think there is often a very real concerns, things to watch out for, and very real benefits. Like it's always a balance. I don't think AI is different in that. And for me, it's how can we seek out that balance, continue to do the research, continue to be looking for, if my opinion is grounded in this, am I still testing it a little bit? Because I agree with you. I would say maybe a year ago, the creativity one was something like I was thinking about, especially artists. I was very worried and concerned about them. And so that's been like a little bit of a research wormhole that I've gone down, and I've come across a musician called Holly Herndon, who is an electronic musician who's got a computer science background out of Stanford. And what she has done is she has decided to design her own large language models, pumping it full of her own content, created like her own bot, and has decided to make it open source for any other musicians. So she makes this generative music, but it's fed on her as a musician. There's a wonderful interview where she talks about how she thinks this kind of technology is going to give more folks access to experimenting with music, which I think is cool. But I would say my learning around so much of this, for me, it's really been about my own network. And Fiona, like I came across you on LinkedIn, and I'm finding I try to share as often as I can things that I'm trying out in that space. And it's really fascinating. As we talked about earlier, I think there is a hesitation right now. Something is so new. So many of us, I think, are afraid of admitting to not knowing how to, or, oof, I should have done this better or use that tool. And so often folks will send me like a private message rather than a comment. And just today, actually, I posted, I've been like really into gardening. And so I just took a picture of those little posts that go into new plants when you buy them that tells you the scientific name and all that. I just took a picture of, I bought 5 different plants. And it was a lengthy prompt, but more or less, I just basically said, give me a concept for how I should plant these with aesthetics in mind. And also, I really want to attract pollinators. And like, I am loving gardening, but there's so much about it that I don't know. And in that use case, it was really interesting because it got me thinking about aesthetic design in a new way. And for me, a lot of this comes back to, if I'm using this technology, do I leave the experience more curious or less? And right now, I'm so interested in those use cases where people are saying, you know what, this is going to be a catalyst for more learning, not necessarily a container. But again, it's been, I think, sharing those stories with one another and looking for more stories is just super important right now. I want to thank you for being engaged in that conversation. And I wonder if, in closing, when you're thinking about your own network or conversations that you're having even face-to-face with people, what's a conversation around AI that you'd love to just see more of, or a question that you wish more of our colleagues and peers were considering? They don't necessarily have to be able to answer it, but they're just asking the question.
That's a great question. I think a couple of things from what you just said. I think it's my years with using assistive technology again in schools. The big lesson I learned was there were so many things, so many applications that we could be using. Just choose your one or two. And just choose your one or two priorities and get really good at those, because a new one's going to come along. I don't know the statistics. I know it used to be about 35,000 apps released a day. I'm sure it's millions now. That's a really old one. So I guess it's just about picking your one or two and just going steady. And I've found that with AI as well. When you approached me to do this podcast, I thought, oh my goodness, I don't know every single AI that I could be possibly using. And I thought, you know what? Nobody does. And it's just about what I personally do in my little tiny world. So I guess in terms of helping our young people not believe in the functionality of it, it's helping them understand their digital diet as well. We have a choice of whether we want to eat Maccas all day and every day, or whether we want to have some fruit and veggies and a balanced diet. And it's quite similar as well. So it's around education. So I guess in terms of the questions around professionals would just be to be curious, and to and probably just step aside, because it's really how it can be helpful for academics is pretty easy. That's really, I guess, for you and I who work in education, the applications for that is this. So once you have a little bit of a dabble, you very quickly work out how differentiation and all sorts of things in terms of an education context. But I'm not sure if professionals are looking at it from that social emotional functionality context as well. Or in schools in particular, we're dealing with a breadth of young people who we have in any one classroom. So we have so many learning differences, we have neurodivergence, we have disability, we have all sorts of young people in our classroom. How can you use it for functional reasons to help those young people, specifically for their individual profile as well, without getting yourself overwhelmed? So I guess it's just about being really curious. There's a fellow here and I would really encourage people to look this up. There's a website called Universal Sandpit. And he is an educator here in Australia, and his website is free, and he's very much into AI, and he has been for quite a long time, and he runs different webinars. I have no affiliation with him, by the way. I just follow all his work. It's great. But he's got these beautiful tabs where you can put in a topic and you can get a whole UDL schema for how you might be able to prepare for a topic or for a unit that you're teaching. He's got social scripts. He's got tabs where you can break down assignments, tabs for task analysis, tabs for differentiation, and I get onto his website fairly regularly, and there's always a new tab. He's just constantly being curious. So I guess it's just be discerning about our professional diet as well as looking at the people who are using it well and optimistically, and because it's here, it's not going to go, and it's polarizing. It's going to either be people who do use it and don't use it. So I guess it's about looking at professional diet too. Who are you going to learn from? And I guess be curious and keep those conversations open would be probably where my standpoint in terms of how we continue to learn and grow with this.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that can even be curiosity about your own opinion, even if you're in an environment where this is not a hot topic. It's interesting to me. Sometimes I speak with people and they're like, actually, we're not really chatting about it. So if that is your context, an example that I give, as I mentioned earlier, I take people through this specific kind of thing that I've created that helps us decode the marketing for a lot of these different AI products. And about 9 months ago, I did this with a product that's called Zuolinguo. It's working on animal communication. The marketing of it is really interesting. And for anyone that loves cats and dogs, it really needles you a little bit in terms of you're going to want to spend money on this because you're going to want to be able to communicate with your animal better. And so I led this group conversation around like, how many of us live with a dog or a cat? Lots of hands went up. And I gave the story about how actually my dog, I feel like we've got a great repertoire. Like we really often know what one another is feeling or thinking. And so I had said, to what extent actually is this really going to solve a real problem? I always push people to be looking at these tools. What is the problem they're purporting to be able to solve? And is it an important problem? How do we know? Because at that point, Fiona, I thought, this is not a pressing concern. I was wrong. I continued to learn about what AI is trying to do in terms of animal communication. And the more and more that I've learned about it, it's fascinating because there are some scientists who are thinking, if we get this right, this might be what nudges folks to go to more of a sustainable diet. If we're able to communicate better with animals, Might more of us decide to become vegetarians? Might more of us decide to take better care of the planet? And so they were walking through these greater ramifications. And I was like, my goodness, yeah, that's right. That might have much, much bigger implications than me asking my dog, do you want to play with this ball or that ball? Which, by the way, there really is one ball. She always tells me that she wants to play with it anyway. So that curiosity is huge.
See, I see that.
Right? Are you also a human to a dog?
Yes. Oh, goodness. Yes, I am. And we think we know what he's saying. He tips his head, and it'd be nice to know what he's really thinking, or maybe not. That's really interesting. I haven't heard of that. But and again, I guess when we're working with other professionals, talking to lots of professionals as well, and because we all have a different angle, because when you were describing that, what was going through my mind was I'm in the business of helping young people make and keep friends with like-minded people, and we've got a lot of young people who have a special interest in cats in particular, and we're often looking for okay, so you've both got a special interest in cats. What's something you can do where you can get together around cats? And sometimes it can be a bit tricky. The cat books will talk about cool cats or look at my cat photos, or our cats don't really play together. So as soon as you were saying that, I was thinking, oh my goodness, that's something that they could be doing when they're getting together. And so that's a social opportunity for young people or anybody who has an interest in cats, and they found somebody.
100%.
It's interesting.
Yes.
We've all kind of talked to different people, and we all come with a completely different lens. So it's got multiple applications.
Yeah. Well, and this is that I do a lot of work with media literacy, and everybody talks about it has to be interdisciplinary. The same thing, I think, is true of AI. So it's a great time for us to get out of any container, real or imagined, and just chat with more people. Fiona, I'm really happy to have been able to have chatted with you today. Right. Listeners, please do head over to the show notes, learn more about connecting with Fiona, the written work that I mentioned as well, and her website. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us.
It's been an absolute pleasure.